The air in the Concord Central Military Academy's training bay smelled of ozone and effort. Kong Ji-woo stood at the back of the group of cadets, her boots feeling too heavy on the polished floor. Around her, the other species moved with a confident grace she was still trying to learn. There were the Vilshan, tall and slender like birds, with long necks and sharp eyes. The Taurians were broad and strong like bulls, their steps steady and solid. And then there were the humans, just a handful of them. Looking strangely soft in comparison, Ji-woo was from a small fishing village on the coast of Korea. She had grown up with the sound of waves and the smell of salt air. Her hands knew the rough texture of nets and the smooth wood of an oar. They did not know the cold grip of a plasma rifle. The weapon in her hands felt wrong. It was called a PR-22 standard issue. It was lighter than it looked, but its balance was strange, and it hummed with a low energy that made her teeth ache. Instructor Kale, a Vilshan with feathers the color of storm clouds, stood before them. His voice was like stone scraping against stone. Today is the Advanced Mobility Assessment. You will navigate Course Gamma. It is a simulation of urban combat. Holographic enemies will appear. Your goal is to reach the end zone with the highest efficiency and the fewest simulated hits. The computer will track your every move. He looked over the cadets, his black eyes pausing on the humans. For some of you, this will be a challenge. The PR-22 is a tool of precision and momentum. You must become one with its systems. Relying on simple, biological reflexes is not enough. Cadet Rail, a Vilshan who always stood at the front, let out a low chirp that sounded like a laugh. He glanced back at Ji-woo, his beak clicking softly. Ji-woo kept her face still, like the calm surface of the sea before a storm. Her friend, Park Min-soo, stood beside her. He was from a big city on Earth and he was better with the technology, but he still struggled. First group prepare, Instructor Kale said. Rail and 4 others stepped onto the marked platform. The lights dimmed and the room transformed. Walls of glowing light sprang up, creating alleys and barriers. The sound of distant energy fire echoed. The cadets moved, their bodies twisting and turning with practiced ease. Rail was like a dancer. He would spin, fire his rifle at a holographic target, use the weapon's slight recoil to change his direction, and slide behind cover. It was brutal and beautiful. Ji-woo watched, trying to understand the flow. But it was too fast, too chaotic. Her mind worked differently. She was used to watching the water, seeing the patterns in the waves, knowing where the fish would be by the subtle shifts in the current. This was all sharp edges and noise. Group 2 prepare. That was her group. Min-soo gave her a nervous smile. Just stick to the plan. Move cover to cover. Ji-woo nodded, her knuckles white on the rifle. She stepped onto the platform. The world became a maze of blue light and shadow. An immediate warning chime sounded in her ear. A red holographic soldier popped up to her left. She jerked the rifle up, fumbling with the safety. She fired. The plasma bolt, a bright streak of orange, went wide and hit a wall, dissipating. The hologram fired back. A beam of light hit her shoulder. A painful electric jolt, low but sharp, made her gasp. A score in the upper corner of her vision dropped. Move, Kong! Min-soo's voice shouted from somewhere ahead. Ji-woo ran, crouching low. The rifle felt clumsy. Its targeting system was trying to help, showing little circles where she should aim, but it was too much information. Another target appeared ahead. She stopped, planted her feet like she'd seen in the manual, and fired. The recoil, a sharp push, was unfamiliar. On Earth, she had used old rifles for hunting. Their recoil was a hard kick straight back. This was different, a twisting, upward push. It threw her aim off again. The bolt missed. She felt a presence behind her. Before she could turn, a different bolt of plasma, this one a stinging blue, struck her squarely in the back. The shock was stronger, knocking her forward a step. It wasn't from a hologram. It was from Cadet Rail. He had finished his run and was now observing, his own rifle lowered but still active in training mode. You are too slow, Earthborn, he chirped, his voice full of cool amusement. You stand like a tree. You need to flow with the fight. Anger, hot and sudden, rose in Jiwoo's chest. She ignored him and pushed forward, trying to focus. But she was flustered. The course was a blur. She took 2 more hits from holograms, each one a sting of failure. When she stumbled into the end zone, her score was the lowest on the display for all to see. The room lights returned to normal. Instructor Kale looked at the results, his feather crest flattening against his skull, a sign of displeasure. Kang Ji-woo, a performance note, he said, his voice cutting through the quiet mumble of the other cadets. You took 5 direct hits. Your weapon accuracy was 18%. You endangered no one but yourself today. But in a live scenario, you would have compromised your entire unit. Ji-woo felt her face grow warm. She stared straight ahead at a point on the far wall. Yes, instructor. Your file says you have no prior experience with energy-based weapon systems, only primitive projectile weapons. He said primitive like it was a disease. My grandfather taught me to hunt, sir. For food, Ji-woo said, her voice quiet but clear. That is not relevant here, Kale stated. The Concorde operates on a standard for a reason. Your biological instincts are not calibrated for this technology. You are a danger in live-fire exercises. Min-soo stepped forward slightly. Instructor, she just needs more time on the simulator. We all struggled at first. Her struggle is fundamental, Cadet Park. It is a matter of biomechanical unsuitability until proven otherwise. Kale walked over to an equipment locker and opened it. He pulled out a long, simple piece of metal. It was a training rod, about as long as Ji-woo's leg, smooth and unpowered. It was meant for practicing manual dexterity and grip strength in zero gravity. Nothing more. He walked back and held it out to her. You are hereby restricted from live weapon drills until further notice. You will turn in your PR-22 to the armorer after this session. A wave of cold washed over Ji-woo. She saw the other cadets staring. Some looked away, embarrassed for her. Rael's expression was one of pure, smug satisfaction. Instructor, she whispered. Take it, Kale said, not unkindly, but with absolute finality. Master moving yourself before you dream of mastering a weapon. Your training now is to learn to navigate the course without being a target. Carry this at all times during drills. Consider it an extension of your body. Learn what it can tell you about space and momentum. When you can move through the basic courses without a single hit, we will revisit your weapon status. Slowly, Ji-woo reached out. Her fingers closed around the cool, smooth metal of the rod. It was light, almost shockingly so after the heavy rifle. She handed her PR-22 to the instructor, feeling a strange emptiness in her hands. Dismissed to the showers. Kang, you will report to Training Bay 3 during the next cycle for remedial mobility. With your rod. The group broke up. As Ji-woo turned to leave, she heard Rael speaking to another Vilshan. His voice just loud enough to carry. A training rod. Perhaps they will find her a rock to practice with next. It is all the primitive species can handle. Min-soo moved to her side, his face angry. Ignore him, Ji-woo. It's just a setback. Ji-woo didn't answer. She looked down at the simple metal rod in her hand. It felt like an insult, a mark of shame that everyone could see. She was the human with the stick. In a galaxy of plasma rifles and starships, she had been given a pole. The walk to the barracks felt longer than any journey from Earth. The weight in her hand was not the weight of the metal, but the weight of a galaxy's low expectations. She was an Earthborn girl from a fishing village, and here that meant nothing at all. The low-gravity gymnasium on the Kessler's Ring station was a quiet, vast space. It was a dome with large viewports looking out onto the stars and the curve of Earth far below. Most cadets used it for strength training or high-velocity ball games. For Kang Ji-woo, it was now her prison. She stood in the center of a marked circle, the cold, smooth training rod in her hand. The shame of the previous day was a hot coal in her stomach. She had slept poorly. The whispers followed her. Earthborn, stick fighter, primitive. She could see the words in the glances of other cadets in the mess hall. Even some of the humans seemed to look through her, as if her failure was a mark against all of them. Park Min-soo had tried to cheer her up, but his words felt hollow. The training rod was not a challenge. It was a message. She did not belong. Instructor Kale's order echoed in her mind. Master, moving yourself. She raised the rod, holding it out in front of her like the rifle it was not. She tried to mimic the stances from the manual, the aggressive forward posture, the sharp angles for quick turns. Felt wrong. The rod was too light. There was no weight to counterbalance, no hum of energy to connect with. She made a lunging motion, then a clumsy block. The silence of the gym swallowed the sounds of her movement. She was just a girl waving a metal stick in an empty room. The frustration boiled over. With a cry of anger that surprised her, she threw the rod. It clattered across the polished floor, spinning until it hit the base of the viewport. She stood there, breathing hard, her fists clenched. Outside the window, Earth hung like a blue and white marble. Home. It looked so peaceful. It did not have plasma rifles or sneering Vilshan. It had her grandfather's house by the sea. The memory came unbidden, sharp and clear. It was not a memory of war or tools, but of dawn. The sky was a pale gray, the air cool and smelling of salt and wet sand. Her grandfather, an old man with hands like weathered rope, stood facing the quiet ocean. In his hands was not a weapon, but a jangbong, a long wooden staff made of polished oak. "Jiwuya," he had said, his voice as steady as the tides. "Come." She was just a child. He placed the staff in her small hands. It was heavy then. "This is not for hitting," he said. "The sea does not hit the rock. It moves around it. The wind does not break the grass. It bends it. This," he tapped the staff, "is for listening." He showed her the first form. It was not an attack. It was a slow, sweeping circle. You are not moving the staff. You are letting it find the space. Your mind is quiet. Your eyes are soft. You do not look at the staff. You feel where it wants to go. Back in the gym, Jiwoo's breathing slowed. She walked over to where the training rod lay and picked it up. It was not oak. It was cold alloy. But it was straight. It had balance. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and walked back to the center of the room. She closed her eyes for a moment, pushing the image of the academy away. She thought of the dawn. She thought of the sound of the waves, a constant, rhythmic sigh. She adjusted her grip on the rod, not at the end like a rifle, but nearer the center, one hand loosely supporting it. She planted her feet, not in an aggressive stance, but with her knees slightly bent, her weight centered. She began to move. Not the sharp military drills. She started the first form her grandfather taught her. A slow, deliberate sweep of the rod from her left side up and over to her right, her body turning with it. The motion felt different here. The station's artificial gravity was slightly less than Earth's. The rod felt even lighter. Its momentum wanted to carry it further. She had to adjust, to guide it, not fight it. She moved into the next movement, a flowing figure-8 pattern in front of her. The old purpose of these forms was to defend against multiple attackers, to keep a sphere of safe space around yourself. But her grandfather's lesson was about something deeper. It was about understanding kinetic flow, the way force moves through a body, through an object, through the world. As she moved, her mind started to quiet. The anger and shame began to recede, like a tide going out. She was not thinking about Cadet Rail or Instructor Kale. She was thinking about the rod. She felt its tip trace arcs through the air. She felt the slight vibration in the metal when she changed direction. She began to understand its balance point perfectly. With a flick of her wrist, she could make it spin, and then stop it dead, catching it without a sound. She practiced for a long time. The basic forms became smoother. She started to experiment. She pushed off gently from the floor, letting herself drift up in the low gravity. As she floated, she used tiny taps of the rod against the floor or the wall to change her direction, to start a slow spin, to stop herself. The rod was no longer just an extension of her arm. It was a probe. It touched the world and told her things. It told her about distance, about surface tension, about her own momentum. A new thought emerged, clear and calm. Instructor Kale had said the rod was to learn about space and momentum. Her grandfather had said the staff was for listening. They were, in their own ways, saying the same thing. The Vilshan looked at the training rod and saw a primitive tool, a placeholder for a real weapon. Jiwoo, in this quiet moment, began to see it as a key. The problem in the mobility course wasn't just the plasma rifle. It was the chaos. The shots came from everywhere. The thinking part of her brain couldn't process it fast enough. But what if she didn't need to think? What if, like reading the sea, she could feel it? She finished her practice, bringing the rod to a rest position at her side. She was sweating, but she felt a calm she hadn't known since arriving on the station. The rod no longer felt like an insult, felt familiar, felt like a piece of home. When she left the gym, she didn't hide the rod. She carried it loosely at her side. Cadet Rail and 2 other Vilshan were walking down the corridor. They saw her and the rod. Rail's beak clicked. "Going to practice your farming, Earthborn?" One of the others chirped. Before, the words would have stung. Now Jiwoo just looked at him. She thought of the steady ocean ignoring the shrieking gull. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply met his gaze for a moment, then looked past him, as if he were a rock in the water, and continued walking. Her silence was more unnerving than any retort. She had a lot of work to do. The rod could listen. Now she had to teach it to hear the specific sounds of war. The whine of a plasma rifle charging, the shift of weight in an opponent's stance, the hiss of a bolt cutting through the air. She had to translate the ancient language of the sea and the staff into the cold mathematics of the Academy's combat courses. The shame was gone. In its place was a simple, focused determination. They had given her a training rod. They thought it was a limit. She was starting to believe it might be an advantage no one else could see. The following week, Instructor Kale was as good as his word. Jiwoo stood at the edge of Course Gamma again. The hum of the holographic projectors filled the air. In her hands was not a PR-22, but the simple training rod. Felt natural now, an old friend from home. The other cadets in her group, including Minsu, checked the power cells of their rifles. They glanced at her with pity or vague annoyance. She was a liability they would have to carry. "Kong." Instructor Kale's voice crackled over the comm in her ear. "You will participate in the mobility exercise. Your goal is to navigate the course. Evasion only. Your score will be based on hits taken. Cadets," he said, addressing the others. "You will treat this as a live-fire exercise. Use low-stun training rounds on all targets, including moving ones. It will add realism." A chill went through Jiwoo. He meant her. She was a moving target. Cadet Rail, already in position, turned his head. She could see the sharp curve of his smile. This was not just an assessment. It was a punishment. The simulation began. Walls of light sprang up. Minsu gave her a desperate look and then moved off to the right, firing at a holographic soldier. Jiwoo took a deep breath. She held the rod not like a weapon, but lightly, diagonally across her body. She stepped into the maze. Her eyes didn't focus on any one thing. She let her vision go soft, like her grandfather taught her when watching the horizon. She saw the whole space. She saw Minsu crouching behind a barrier. She saw the glint of a rifle barrel 2 alleys over. She saw the subtle shift in the light that meant a hologram was about to form. A flicker to her left. She didn't jump. She simply shifted her weight, took a smooth step to the right, and turned her body. A blue training bolt, fired from the rifle of a Taurian cadet named Gore, sizzled past her left shoulder, close enough for her to feel the heat on her cheek. It hit the wall behind her and burst into harmless sparks. She didn't run. Running was a straight line, and straight lines were easy to hit. She walked, but her walk was a flow. She moved from the cover of one low wall to the next, but her path was not direct. It was a curve. Her rod was constantly moving, just slightly. It would tap a wall as she passed, giving her feedback on the distance. It would point ahead, an unconscious probe testing the space. From up on a catwalk, Rail saw her. He saw the casual, almost lazy way she moved. It was an insult. He raised his rifle, his sharp eyes tracking her. He led her, aiming for where she would be if she continued her path. He fired. Jiwoo didn't see the bolt. She saw Rail. She saw the slight tension in his shoulders as he braced. She saw the minute dip of his rifle's muzzle as he compensated for recoil. It was the same as watching her grandfather's fishing rod tip dip before a strike. Her body reacted before the blue fire left his barrel. She stopped her forward motion and took a single, small step back, pulling the training rod vertical beside her. The plasma round passed exactly through the space her chest had occupied a half-second before. It burst against the floor. Rail stared. Luck. It had to be luck. He fired again, rapidly. 2 more bolts. Jiwoo was already turning. The first shot missed wide. The second, she avoided not by ducking, but by leaning into her turn, letting the momentum of her own spin carry her just outside its path. The rod whirled with her, a silent partner in the dance. She was not thinking. She was feeling. The course was a current. The other cadets were rocks and eddies in that current. Their intentions, their aim, their aggression created disturbances. Her mind, trained to read the subtle patterns of water and the flow of a staff, read these disturbances. The training rod was her anchor, her center point. With it, she knew exactly where her body ended and the world began. Min-soo was pinned down, holographic fire coming from the front, and real training bolts from a Vilshan cadet coming from the side. Jiwoo flowed into his alley. She didn't look at the shots. She looked at the shooter. The Vilshan cadet was focused on Min-soo, his posture aggressive, rooted. Min-soo, down! Jiwoo called, her voice calm. Surprised, Min-soo dropped. The Vilshan cadet, startled by her sudden appearance, swung his rifle toward her. It was a fast motion, but to Jiwoo it was a huge, telegraphed wave of force. She stepped forward, not away. Her rod came up not to block, but to intercept the path of the rifle itself. She didn't strike the cadet. She gently tapped the barrel of his rifle as he swung it, just a glancing touch. It was enough. The rifle's trajectory was altered by a few degrees. The plasma bolt meant for her head hissed past her ear and hit a holographic enemy behind her, destroying it. The Vilshan cadet stumbled off balance, shocked by the quiet precision of the interference. Jiwoo was already moving past him. A touch of her rod against the wall, redirecting her smoothly around a corner. She entered a more open area. A holographic heavy gunner appeared, its weapon glowing. At the same time, from a high window, Rail fired again. And from her right, another cadet, seeing an easy target, also took a shot. 3 sources of fire. The computer would have calculated the intersection as unavoidable. Jiwoo's mind did not calculate. It perceived. The holographic fire was a pattern, predictable after watching it for a week. She ignored it for a split second. The cadet on her right was nervous, his aim shaky. His bolt would go high. Rail's shot was the true threat, aimed and steady. She dropped into a low crouch, not a frantic dive, but a controlled sinking of her weight. The training rod swept in a low arc, its tip scraping the floor. Rail's shot passed over her head. The nervous cadet's shot went high as predicted. The holographic bolts passed through the space where her torso had been. In one fluid motion from the crouch, she rose and was moving again, leaving the intersection behind. A strange silence fell over the observation deck where Instructor Kale watched. The other instructors and off-duty cadets had gathered, drawn by the unusual spectacle. They watched the feed from Jiwoo's body cam. It was not the frantic, adrenalized view they were used to. It was steady, calm. The training rod was always in the edge of the frame, a constant, moving center. She finished the course. The timer stopped. The data flashed on the main screen. Cadet Kang Jiwoo. Hits taken, 0. Evasion score 100%. A0. She had not been touched. Not by a single training round. Not by a single hologram. The bay doors opened. The other cadets walked out, breathing hard, their uniforms scored with the faint marks of near misses. Jiwoo walked out calmly, the training rod held loosely at her side. Her face was sheened with sweat, but her breathing was even. Rail stormed out. His feathers puffed in anger. He marched up to Instructor Kale. She cheated. The calibration on our rifles must be off. There is no way. She is just a human with a stick. Instructor Kale looked from Rail's furious face to Jiwoo's calm one. He looked at the data again. The computer had tracked every shot. Every shot had missed. Not by feet, but by millimeters. Consistent, precise evasion. The systems are functioning perfectly, Cadet Rail, Kale said, his voice slow, thoughtful. He turned his dark eyes to Jiwoo.
Kang.
Explain. Jiwoo looked at the training rod in her hand. How could she explain the sea? How could she explain the decades of quiet wisdom in a grandfather's staff lessons? I just moved to the empty spaces. Sir? She said, her voice quiet. The rod. It helps me feel where they are. Rail let out a sharp, disbelieving click. Empty spaces. This is nonsense. It was luck and faulty systems. But Instructor Kale was no longer looking at Rail. He was studying Jiwoo, really studying her, for the first time. He saw the calm in her posture, the centered balance. He saw the tool in her hand not as a joke, but as something she understood on a level he did not. The girl was not faster than plasma. That was impossible. But the score was on the screen. 0 hits. Dismissed, Kale said finally, his tone unreadable. All of you. Kong. Keep the rod. As the group dispersed, the whispers were different now. They were not of mockery, but of confusion, of a strange, new curiosity. Jiwoo walked back to the barracks, the rod in her hand. It was the same piece of metal, but she and everyone who had watched could never see it the same way again. The plasma rounds had never touched her, and no one could quite understand why. The rumor moved through the Concord Academy like an electric current. It jumped from cadet to cadet, from species to species, growing and changing with each telling. Some said the Earthborn girl had a personal shield generator hidden in her uniform. Others whispered that she had hacked the training simulators. The most popular, and to the Vilshan the most insulting theory, was that there had been a massive system error, a glitch that had given her a perfect score by mistake. But one person did not believe it was a mistake. Cadet Rail. He had been there. He had fired the shots himself. He had seen the calm in her eyes, the way she moved not with panic, but with a quiet certainty. It infuriated him. His pride, his status as the top cadet in their intake, felt stained. A human with a stick had made him look foolish. It could not stand. He found his opportunity 3 days later in the common mess hall. Jiwoo was sitting with Min-soo, eating a simple meal of rehydrated grains and vegetables. She had her training rod leaning against the table, always within reach. The chatter in the hall dipped slightly as Rail approached, 2 other Vilshan cadets flanking him. Kong Jiwoo, he said, his voice loud enough to carry. The mess hall grew quiet. Your performance was entertaining. A lucky day for glitches. Jiwoo looked up but said nothing. She took a slow drink of water. Your silence does not change the facts, Rail continued, his feathers twitching. You evaded nothing. The machines failed. Anyone can stand still when the guns do not work. Min-soo put down his utensil. Back off, Rail. The instructor cleared the systems. The instructor was not the one being shot at, Rail snapped. He focused his black eyes on Jiwoo. You carry that rod like you earned it. You did not. You hide behind malfunctions and human trickery. I think you are a fraud. Your species is a fraud, pretending to be warriors when you are only good with simple tools. That stirred a reaction. The few other human cadets in the room stiffened. Jiwoo finally put her cup down. She met his gaze. Her voice was flat, without anger. What do you want, Cadet Rail? Proof, he said, clicking his beak. A real test. Not a corrupted course with everyone shooting at holograms. A direct match. You and me. A murmur ran through the crowd. Direct challenges happened, but they were usually between rivals of similar standing, and always with the same equipment. You have a rifle, Jiwoo said. I have a rod. It is not a fair match. Exactly. Rail spread his hands, as if she had proven his point. It is not fair for you, because you are not a soldier. You are a performer. So I will make it fair in a way your simple mind can understand. A void chase. The murmur became a buzz of excitement. The void chase was a zero-gravity sport, a favorite at the academy. It was played in a large spherical chamber filled with floating obstacles. Each player had a small shoulder plate. The goal was to tag your opponent's plate while protecting your own. It tested agility, strategy, and control. Weapons were allowed, but only to tag, no damaging shots. It was a game of skill, not destruction. A standard match, Rail declared. In the main chamber. Tomorrow, during free rotation, I will use a standard PR-22 in training tag mode. You may use your precious rod. The first to 3 tags wins. He leaned forward. Unless you are afraid your empty spaces will not be there when it is just you and me. The entire mess hall was silent, waiting. Min-Soo shook his head fiercely at Ji-woo, his eyes wide with warning. This was a trap. Rail was the Academy's top-rated zero-gravity athlete. His people were naturally agile. In the void, with a rifle that could tag from a distance, he was nearly unbeatable. She would be floating with a stick. Ji-woo looked past Rail's sharp face. She thought of the low-gravity gym. She thought of the feeling of tapping the rod against a surface to send herself into a slow, controlled spin. She thought of the sea, not as water, but as a vast, weightless medium. The void chase chamber was just another kind of current. "Okay," she said. The single word dropped into the quiet room. Even Rail seemed surprised for a moment. Then his triumph returned. "Good. The match will be witnessed. Let us see what your Earthborn tricks are worth when they cannot be hidden by a computer error." He turned and strode away, his followers behind him. The mess hall erupted into noise. Excited chatter. Bets being suggested. Theories argued. Min-Soo grabbed Ji-woo's arm. "Are you crazy? He's the best. He'll tag you 3 times before you even get your bearings. That rifle has a thruster pack for maneuvering. You'll have to push off walls like a stone." "A stone is only a problem if it does not know it is sinking," Ji-woo said. But her mind was already elsewhere. She wasn't thinking about winning. She was thinking about moving. The rod was the key. In zero gravity, it would be even more of an extension of her. It would be her paddle in the current. News of the challenge reached the instructors by the end of the day. Instructor Kale summoned both cadets to his office. "This is irregular," he stated, looking from one to the other. "A ranked cadet challenging one on weapon restriction with a tool. It is not balanced." "She accepted the terms freely, instructor," Rail said, standing stiffly. "It is a matter of honor and clarity." Kale's eyes shifted to Ji-woo. "Cadet Kong, you understand the parameters? Tag rules only. His rifle will emit a low-energy pulse that will mark your shoulder plate if it makes contact. Your rod must make physical contact with his plate. He has a mobility advantage." "I understand, sir," Ji-woo said. "And you still wish to proceed? I can deny this. It serves no training purpose." Ji-woo thought about it. She thought about the whispers, the stares, the idea that her success was a glitch. She thought about carrying the rod forever as a symbol of her limits. This was a current she could not avoid. She had to move into it. "I wish to proceed, sir." Instructor Kale was silent for a long moment. Finally, he gave a slow nod. "Very well. The match is approved. I will referee." Dismissed. That night, Ji-woo did not go to the gym. She went to the observation gallery that overlooked the main void chase chamber. It was a huge, clear sphere, currently dark and empty. Inside, she could see the floating blocks and hoops, the handholds and barriers, all designed to be pushed off of. She watched as maintenance drones floated through, checking lights. Min-Soo found her there. "You can't seriously think you can win." "I do not think about winning," she said, her eyes tracing a path from one obstacle to another. "I think about not being where his shot will be." "How?" "He's faster. His tool has range." Ji-woo pointed into the chamber. "In there, everything is movement. Every push is a commitment. Once you are moving in a line, you cannot change until you touch something else. He will think in lines. The rifle's thruster makes straight lines." She turned to Min-Soo. "My rod is short. It is for small touches. To change a little, not a lot. I will not go in straight lines." Minsu stared at her, not understanding the physics, but understanding the calm in her voice. It was the same calm she had before entering the mobility course. It was not the calm of confidence, but the calm of focus. She was not seeing an opponent. She was reading the water. He sighed. Just don't let him tag you 3 times in 10 seconds. Make him work for it. For all of us.
Ivo nodded.
She took one last look at the vast, dark sphere. Tomorrow it would be filled with light and noise and a single, chasing enemy. But in her mind, it was already quiet. It was just another space to move through. They had given her a training rod. Tomorrow, she would show them what it could really do. The main void chase chamber was not dark anymore. It was blazing with light. The entire spherical space was illuminated, the floating obstacles casting long, shifting shadows. The chamber walls were lined with hundreds of cadets from every species in the academy. A low, excited hum vibrated through the air. This was not just a match. It was a spectacle. Jiwoo stood in the small airlock entrance, dressed in a standard gray zero-gravity suit. The training rod was in her hand. On her left shoulder was a circular, glowing blue plate, the tag target. Across the sphere at the opposite entrance, she could see Cadet Rail. His suit was the same, but he held a PR-22 rifle, its barrel fitted with a bright orange training cap. A small thruster pack was attached to its stock. On his shoulder, a glowing red plate. Instructor Kale's voice boomed over the chamber speakers, echoing slightly. Cadets, this is a standard void chase match. First to 3 tags wins. Weapons are for tagging only. No contact with the opponent's body. No damaging the chamber. Begin on the central tone. A single, deep chime sounded. Rail moved instantly. He pushed off hard from his entrance, tucking into a roll, and then activated his rifle's thruster. A small puff of gas propelled him in a fast, straight line towards the cluster of floating blocks in the center. It was an aggressive, dominating opening. The audience murmured in approval. Jiwoo did not push off. She simply stepped out of the airlock and let herself float. She held the rod loosely. She drifted, a still point in the moving sphere. Her eyes were on Rail, but her focus was wider, taking in the whole space. The spin of a distant hoop, the slow drift of a large padded cylinder. Rail reached the central blocks. He hooked a foot on one, stopping his momentum with practiced ease. He turned, raised his rifle, and fired. A pulse of orange light shot from the barrel. Not a bolt, but a quick, straight beam meant to mark her plate. Jiwoo didn't flinch. She had been watching his posture, the way his body tensed as he aimed. Just before the pulse left the rifle, she used the tip of her rod to give a tiny, precise tap against the airlock frame behind her. It was not a powerful push. It was a nudge. Her body drifted sideways by less than a meter. The orange pulse streaked through the space where her chest had been and winked out against the far wall. A quiet "oh" rippled through the spectators. Rail's eyes narrowed. He pushed off the block, using the thruster to change his angle, and fired twice more in rapid succession as he moved. Jiwoo was already in motion. Her first tap had started a slow rotation. She didn't fight it. She used it. As she turned, she extended the rod, touching it lightly to a passing handhold on the wall. The contact altered her spin and added a gentle drift towards a large, floating net. The 2 pulses shot past her, one above her head, one below her feet. She reached the net. Instead of grabbing it, she let her legs pass through its holes, using the slight friction to slow her rotation. She was now floating near the edge of the sphere, watching Rail. He was moving in sharp, confident lines from obstacle to obstacle, using the thruster for bursts of speed. He was a hunter. She was a leaf on a pond. He came at her again, this time using a series of blocks as cover. He fired from behind one, then used the thruster to zip to the next firing position. His movements were impressive, athletic. The pulses of orange light cut through the air. Jiwoo moved, but her movements were small, subtle. A tap of the rod against a net post sent her drifting backwards. A gentle push off a padded wall changed her facing. She wasn't trying to get away. She was staying just within range, letting him commit to his shots. Each time he fired, She was already shifting, her movements so economical they looked almost lazy. The pulses missed, painting the walls with brief flashes of light. The crowd's murmur changed. The excitement was still there, but it was mixed with confusion. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was just not being there. Rael was doing everything right, everything by the book, and nothing was working. Frustration began to show in Rael's movements. His lines became tighter, more aggressive. He used a powerful thruster burst to close the distance directly, zooming towards her. He wanted to get point blank, where she couldn't dodge. This was the moment Ji-woo had been waiting for. He was coming in a straight, predictable line. As he flew towards her, rifle raised, she did something unexpected. She pushed off towards him. Not away. It was a short, soft push from a handhold. She floated to meet him, her body sideways. Rael, surprised, adjusted his aim. At this range, he couldn't miss. He fired. Ji-woo didn't try to avoid the pulse. She moved the training rod. She didn't swing it at him. She simply placed it between his rifle and her shoulder plate. The orange pulse hit the metal rod with a sharp ping and dissipated harmlessly. The rod vibrated in her hand. The rules said no contact with the opponent's body. It said nothing about their weapon. In the split second of Rael's shock, as he floated past her, close enough to touch, Ji-woo's other hand came up. Not in a fist. It was an open hand. She didn't hit his red shoulder plate. She touched it, her palm making firm contact as he drifted by it. A loud, resonant bong echoed through the chamber. A green light flashed on Ji-woo's shoulder plate. The main display above shimmered. Score. Tone. Rael 0. Silence. Complete, utter silence filled the giant sphere. No one cheered. They were too stunned. Rael had fired. She had blocked with a stick. And then she had tagged him. It was so simple it looked impossible. Rael twisted in the air, his face a mask of pure disbelief and rage. He shoved off from a wall, putting distance between them. The match wasn't over. It had just become real. Ji-woo floated back towards the center, her breathing calm inside her helmet. The rod felt warm in her hand. She had found the rhythm. His current was strong, fast, and linear. Hers was slow, circular, and adaptive. He was a spear. She was water. The second point was faster. Rael, furious, tried a complex maneuver, using 2 thruster bursts to come at her from an angle she wasn't facing. But Ji-woo wasn't using her eyes to track him. She was using the echoes in the chamber, the subtle shifts in the light on the obstacles around her. She felt his approach like a change in pressure. As he fired, she was already tucking into a ball, rotating. The pulse grazed the sole of her boot. Still floating from her dodge, she uncurled and, with a motion so fluid it seemed rehearsed, extended the rod. She didn't reach for him. She placed the tip of the rod against a floating hoop beside her and pushed. The reaction sent her sliding directly towards Rael, who was still recovering from his missed shot. He tried to bring his rifle around. Too late. The end of her training rod tapped squarely, gently, against the center of his red shoulder plate. Bonged at score. Kung 2. Rael 0. Now the crowd made noise. It wasn't cheering. It was a collective gasp, a roar of astonishment. Instructor Kale, watching from the referee's booth, leaned forward, his hands on the console. His sharp eyes were wide. Rael was trembling. His perfect record, his certainty, was crumbling in front of everyone. He needed 1 point to stay in the match. He went silent, his movements becoming desperate, reckless. He chased her, firing pulse after pulse, using the thruster without care for his air or stability. Ji-woo flowed. She weaved through the obstacles, her rod constantly touching, tapping, redirecting. She was never where he shot. She was a shadow he couldn't catch. He exhausted his thruster's primary cell. The audience watched a top Vilshan cadet, armed with a ranged weapon, being effortlessly herded and outmaneuvered by a human drifting with a piece of metal. The end came not with a dramatic chase, but with stillness. Rael, panting, had pushed himself into a corner of the chamber, near a large, flat barrier. He raised his rifle for one more shot. Ji-woo floated about 5 meters away, near a cluster of small floating orbs. He fired. She moved, not away from the shot, but towards the cluster of orbs. She used the rod to tap one orb, then another in quick succession. Each tap changed her direction slightly, creating a zigzag drift that was impossible to lead. The pulse missed. And then she was there. She hadn't used a thruster. She had used geometry and gentle touches. She floated right up to him. He tried to bring his rifle down to block, to hit her rod away. Jiwoo didn't swing. She just turned her wrist. The training rod spun in her grip, wrapping around his rifle barrel in a soft, binding motion, and nudged it aside. In the same movement, she leaned forward in the zero gravity and pressed her own blue shoulder plate directly against his red one. Bong.
BLNR The final tone sounder.
The match was over. Final score, Kong 3. Rail 0. The chamber was thunderously loud, then utterly silent again, as the score hung in the air. Perfect victory. Rail floated, defeated, staring at the rifle in his hands, as if it had betrayed him. Jiwoo pushed back gently from him, retrieving her rod. She looked over at the referee's booth, then at the hundreds of faces pressed against the observation glass. Their expressions were not of mockery anymore. They were of awe, of fear, of utter confusion. She had done it with a training rod. The plasma rounds, in every form they had taken, had never touched her. The silence in the void chase chamber was so deep it felt like a physical thing. It lasted for 3 full seconds after the final tone. Then the noise came. It wasn't cheering. It was a chaotic wave of shouts, questions, and exclamations from hundreds of voices, all talking over each other. Cadets pressed against the observation glass, pointing. On the display, the numbers glowed without mercy. Kong 3. Rail 0. Inside the chamber, Jiwoo floated quietly, the training rod held loosely in her hand. Her breathing was steady. The adrenaline was there, a hum in her veins, but it was covered by a deeper layer of calm. It was the calm after a long swim, when you finally rest on the shore. Across from her, Cadet Rail was not calm. He was frozen, one hand gripping a handhold on the flat barrier. His black eyes were fixed on nothing, his feathers pressed flat and tight against his body in a posture of profound defeat. The rifle in his other hand looked like a useless toy. He did not look at her. A light flashed on the wall. The main airlock door cycled open. Instructor Kale floated through, using small jets on his suit to maneuver. His face, behind his helmet, was unreadable. He moved between them, looking first at Rail, then at Jiwoo. He signaled for them to follow. They exited the chamber into a ready room. The roar of the crowd was muffled here, but they could still hear it through the walls. As they removed their helmets, the sound became a dull rumble. Rail placed his helmet and rifle on a rack with stiff, mechanical movements. He still did not speak. Instructor Kale turned to him. Cadet Rail, you are dismissed. Report to your quarters. It was not a suggestion. Rail gave a short, sharp nod, his eyes finally flicking to Jiwoo. There was no anger left in his gaze. There was only a hollowed-out confusion. He turned and left the room without a word. The door hissed shut, leaving Jiwoo alone with Instructor Kale. The rumble from the hallways seemed to grow quieter. Kale studied her. He looked at her face, at her hands, and finally at the training rod she still held. Walk with me, he said. His voice low. He led her not to the barracks, nor to his office, but to a quiet observation lounge overlooking the Academy's central spire. The stars were bright pinpricks in the blackness. Earth hung in the distance, a silent witness. For a long time, Kale said nothing. He just watched the stars. Jiwoo stood beside him, waiting. The rod felt warm in her grip. That was not luck, Kale said finally. It was not a question. That was not a glitch. And that, he turned to look at the rod, is not a simple tool. Not in your hands. Jiwoo remained silent. She had no explanation that would fit in a report. Your file is very simple, Kong Jiwoo. Coastal village. Basic education. No advanced tactical training. Grandparents were fishermen. He crossed his arms. The PR-22 rifle has a targeting computer that calculates trajectories, wind resistance, and target movement 1,000 times a second. You beat it. You beat one of my best cadets who was using it without a single ranging device. How? He wasn't accusing her. He was truly asking. He was a soldier, and he had seen something on the battlefield he could not explain. Ji-woo looked out at Earth. How could she explain the sea? How could she explain the years of watching her grandfather's boat ride the swells, of knowing where to cast a net not by numbers, but by the texture of the water and the cry of the gulls? It is not about the target, sir, she said slowly, choosing her words with care. It is about the one who holds the weapon. Kale's feather crest lifted slightly. Explain. On Earth, my grandfather taught me with a staff. A wooden stick, like this one, but older. She lifted the training rod. He did not teach me to hit. He taught me to feel. When you hold a staff, you feel every vibration. You learn how force moves through it. You learn that someone who wants to strike, they must first tense. They must shift their weight. They must breathe in a certain way. The weapon is the last thing that moves. She turned to face him. In the chamber, I was not watching the orange light from Cadet Rail's rifle. I was watching Cadet Rail. I saw his shoulders tighten before he fired. I saw the way his foot pushed off a wall, which told me which way he would drift. The rifle, it just pointed where he was already going to point. I moved before the light came out. Instructor Kale stared at her. He was processing. He was a creature of technology, of specs and performance metrics. What she was describing was ancient, almost animal. You are reading intent, he said, the concept foreign on his tongue. Yes, sir. The rod helps. It is like, she searched for a word. It is like a fishing line in the water. You do not see the fish. You feel the tug on the line. In there, the rod was my line. Touched the walls, the obstacles. It told me about my own momentum so I could focus on his. Kale was silent for another long moment. He looked from her to the vastness of space. And the sea you mention? What does that have to do with zero-gravity combat? The sea is never still, Ji-woo said, a small, familiar image in her mind. There are currents under the surface, deep ones. On top there are waves. To sail, you cannot fight the current. You must use it. You must know when a wave is going to lift you and when it will drop you. The chamber, it was just another kind of current. Cadet Rail's movements were the big surface waves. I just had to find the quiet water between them. Instructor Kale let out a slow breath, a sound almost like a sigh. He looked at the training rod with new eyes. It was not a symbol of limitation. In her hands, it was a key to a type of perception his entire civilization had overlooked in its pursuit of better sensors and faster computers. Your weapon restriction is lifted, effective immediately, he said, his voice formal again, but different. You will be issued a PR-22. You will attend all live-fire drills. Thank you, sir, Ji-woo said. That is not all, Kale continued. What you did in there, it is not in any manual. Cannot be programmed into a simulator. But it has value. Obvious tactical value. He seemed to be thinking aloud. I cannot promote you. I cannot give you a medal for winning a game. But I can give you a classroom.
Ivo blinked.
Sir, starting next cycle, Instructor Kale said, a decision solidifying in his voice. You will assist in a new training module. We will call it Kinetic Awareness. You will teach cadets, volunteers only, what you just told me. Not how to fight, how to see, how to feel the fight before it happens, how to use a simple tool to understand space. He looked at her directly. Can you do that? Ji-woo thought of Min-soo's worried face, of the other humans who walked with their heads down. She thought of the confused, awed stares of the cadets in the observation gallery. They didn't need to learn to be her. They needed to learn that there was more than one way to see. I can try, sir, she said. Good. Dismissed. Cadet Kong. Get some rest. You have a class to plan. Ji-woo saluted, turned, and walked out of the lounge. The corridors were still buzzing, but as she walked, cadets didn't just stare. Some looked away, unsure. A young Taurian cadet gave her a slow, respectful nod. A human cadet from another squad offered a tentative smile. She returned to her barracks room. Minsu was there, waiting, his face split in a huge, disbelieving grin. "You were amazing. I can't believe it. 3-0. How did you?" But he stopped when he saw her face. She wasn't glowing with victory. She looked thoughtful and a little tired. She placed the training rod carefully on her desk. "It's over?" Minsu asked. "For Rail, maybe," Jiwoo said, sitting on her bunk. "For me, Instructor Kale wants me to teach, to tell others about the rod, about the current." Minsu sat down beside her, his excitement turning to quiet wonder. "Teach? Like, be an instructor? Just a helper?" Jiwoo said. But she looked at the rod. It was just metal, but it was also a bridge. A bridge from a quiet fishing village to the heart of a galactic academy. They had given the Earthborn girl a training rod, thinking it was the end of her story. She was just beginning to understand what it really was. The official notice appeared on the Academy network the next morning. It was a simple announcement for a new, optional training module: Kinetic Awareness, Fundamentals of Spatial Prediction and Movement Efficiency. The listed instructor was Instructor Kale. The assistant instructor was Cadet Kang Ji-woo. There was no mention of the Void Chase, no mention of training rods, but everyone knew. The first session was held in a medium-sized gymnasium, not the high-tech combat sims. Word had spread, and when Ji-woo arrived, she was surprised to see not just a handful of cadets, but dozens. They stood in loose clusters, humans, a few Taurians, even some of the smaller, quick-reacting Felniks. They talked in low voices, their eyes curious and skeptical. At the back of the room, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, was Cadet Rail. He did not look at anyone. He just stared at the far wall, his expression closed. His presence sent a ripple of tension through the room. Instructor Kale entered, his footsteps sharp on the floor. The chatter died. "This module is supplemental," he began, his voice echoing. "It will not improve your marksmanship score. It will not increase your strength metrics. Its goal is to improve your perceptual awareness. Cadet Kang will demonstrate the core concept." He nodded to Ji-woo. She walked to the center of the room, her training rod in hand. She felt the weight of all their eyes. These were not holograms. These were living, judging people. "The first lesson," she said, her voice quieter than Kale's but clear, "is about your center." She held the rod out horizontally with one finger underneath, finding its balance point. "You must know your own balance perfectly. If you do not know where your own weight is, you cannot feel anything else." She led them through simple exercises, standing on one foot, shifting weight from heel to toe without wobbling. Felt childish. A few cadets, especially some Vilshan who had come to watch, snorted and left. Rail did not move. Ji-woo ignored them. She moved to the next part. Now with a partner. One person will try to tap the other's shoulder. Very slow. The goal is not to avoid the tap. The goal is to see it coming. Watch the eyes. Watch the shoulder. Feel the shift in the air. Minsu, her volunteer partner, played along. He moved his hand slowly towards her. Ji-woo didn't watch his hand. She watched his chest. As he reached out, his center of weight moved forward just a little. She shifted her stance an inch, and his fingers missed her shoulder. "You did not move away from my hand," Minsu said, surprised. "You moved away from me." "Yes," Ji-woo said. A few of the cadets were leaning forward now, seeing it. The sessions continued twice a week. The groups got smaller but more focused. Ji-woo taught them to use a training rod not as a weapon, but as a probe. To close their eyes and tap a wall, learning to judge distance by the vibration in the metal. To walk across an uneven floor while keeping a marble balanced on a flat plate, learning to adjust their gait without conscious thought. She spoke of currents and empty spaces. She used the analogy of the sea. At first, it sounded like poetry, not tactics. But then she would demonstrate. A cadet would swing a padded baton at her, and she would move so that it passed harmlessly by, her own rod gently redirecting the force of the swing. Not opposing at point one afternoon, she introduced a simple exercise. 2 cadets stood opposite each other, each with a training rod. The goal was to touch the other's foot. Quickly became a clumsy, noisy game of poking and hitting. Ji-woo stopped them. "You are fighting the other rod," she said. "Do not look at the rod. Look at your partner's hips. The rod goes where the hips lead it." They tried again. It was harder. But then a human cadet named Lee Hannah, after concentrating deeply, managed to slip her rod past her partner's defense and tap his foot. She didn't do it with speed, but with timing. She had seen him commit his weight. A slow smile spread on her face. "Oh," she said. It was a small sound, but it was the sound of understanding. Not everyone got it, but some did. A Taurian cadet found the concepts matched his people's natural sense of grounded stability. A Felnix cadet discovered her natural quickness was even more effective when she knew where to be quick. Rail attended every session. He never participated. He just watched from the back. His anger was gone, replaced by an intense, silent study. He watched Ji-woo's every move, his sharp eyes missing nothing. During the 5th session, Instructor Kale brought in a low-powered, slow-firing training drone. It was programmed to fire soft foam pellets at random intervals. The cadets, using their rods and their new exercises, tried to avoid the pellets. Most failed, batting at the pellets clumsily. Ji-woo took her turn. She stood in the marked circle, rod in hand. The drone whirred, circling her. Fired a pellet. She didn't swing. She turned her rod sideways and simply intercepted the pellet's path, deflecting it. The drone fired 2 in quick succession. She took a small, gliding step, and both pellets passed through the space she had left. She wasn't faster than the machine. She was anticipating its programming, its rhythm. To the watching cadets, it looked like magic. To Ji-woo, it was just listening to a new, mechanical kind of current. After the drone was shut off, the room was quiet. Rail finally moved. He pushed himself off the wall and walked towards the center of the room. All eyes turned to him. He stopped in front of Ji-woo. For a long moment, he said nothing. The room held its breath. Then he spoke, his voice rough but clear. "I did not understand," he said. The words were not an apology. They were a statement of fact. "I saw a tool. I did not see the mind using it." He looked at the training rod in her hand, then at his own empty hands. "My people value speed and direct force. It is our way. Your way. It is different. It is not weakness." He gave a stiff nod, first to Ji-woo, then to Instructor Kale. Then he turned and walked out of the gymnasium. His departure seemed to break a final barrier. The module was no longer a curiosity. It was valid. The story of the Earthborn girl and her rod was no longer a joke or a scandal. It was a lesson. The change was not dramatic. There was no parade. Ji-woo was not made an officer. But in the mess hall, cadets no longer whispered as she passed. They nodded. Sometimes, a Vilshan would give her the same brief, respectful chin lift they gave each other. Human cadets walked a little taller. Instructor Kale submitted a report to the Concord Military Board. It was a dry, technical document about alternative perceptual training methods derived from human physical disciplines. Attached were performance metrics showing slight but measurable improvements in evasion scores for cadets who took the module. The report was filed. It would move slowly through the bureaucracy of 1,000 species. But on the Kessler's ring, something small and important had changed. The Academy had been given a new data point on humanity. They were not just another species trying to catch up with galactic technology. They brought something ancient and unique with them. A way of thinking woven from watching oceans and feeling the flow of force through wood and bone. Ji-woo's final session of the term was in the low-gravity gym. She stood at the viewport, looking down at Earth. Minsu floated up beside her. "Do you think they'll keep the module next term?" he asked. "I do not know," Ji-woo said. "It does not matter." He looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "Of course it matters." She turned from the blue planet to the gym behind her, where a few dedicated cadets were practicing the slow, circular forms with their rods, learning to listen to the space around them. They gave me a training rod to limit me, she said softly. But it was a key. I used it. Now others have seen the lock. They can find their own keys. Maybe a staff. Maybe a breath. Maybe just their own 2 feet. The idea is out there now. That is what matters. She pushed off gently from the viewport, rod in hand, and floated back towards the center of the room. A young Taurian cadet was struggling with a basic form, his movements too forceful. Ji-woo drifted over to him. "Your center is too high," she said, her voice calm. "Think of being a mountain, not a wave. Let's try again." The cadet nodded, reset his stance, and began the form once more. This time his movement was slower, more rooted. It was not perfect, but it was a beginning. The Earthborn girl with the training rod had taught them that, in a galaxy of plasma fire, sometimes the quietest movement was the most powerful one.